Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. All right, welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton and former Georgia tight end Arthur Lynch. Already, we are live week one, baby. We are finally here. All right, we got some football this week, big-time football this week. Georgia takes on Clemson in Atlanta. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, noon kick. We don't like that, but at least we have a kickoff, folks. Georgia's Kirby Smart, Clemson's Dabo Swinney, two of the best coaches in the college football, arguably if you're on the Clemson side there, matching up here for a week one matchup. Great to have a good big-time season opener. That's what it feels like when you have two of these perennial powers headed off to Atlanta to face each other. We're really excited for this game, and Artie and I are going to break some of that down, of course, for you guys. Thanks for joining us live, whether you're on X, Facebook, or YouTube. We'll be here twice a week throughout the season. We're going Mondays and Thursdays at this time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, Artie, not to piss people off, but Georgia Tech played in week 0. And we talked about that this last week, right? And we gave our picks. We liked Tech to cover, 11.5. We liked the under of 55. And we talked about at length what kind of, what we were feeling in that game, because we didn't have any other games to really talk about. It is notable, right? So we make our picks known, and then the game turns out how it turns out. Georgia Tech stuns number 10 Florida State in Ireland, really controlled that ball game with the ground game. Haynes King looked so efficient, right? That defense played a lot better than we saw last year as far as getting after the passer, closing off those rush lanes from Florida State. DJ had a tough game. They wouldn't really let him push it downfield. And then Georgia Tech gets that win and comes and gets a former Georgia defensive line commit, 4-star, right, and get that coming off of that big week for them. So not only were they trending upwards last year in their first winning season since, 2018, I think it was, under Britt Key last year, and now they get this big win to start the season. And as a guy who played in clean old-fashioned hate, I think you have something to say about this Yellow Jackets team.
Yeah, look, well, you and I talked about it. We talked about it, offline and obviously online last week, and we felt pretty good about our picks, and we were right. And you and I actually spoke offline on Saturday, and you were thinking about reneging, and then all of a sudden we were following it, and I was like, and I felt confident that Georgia Tech was definitely going to cover. And then about halftime, I was like, they're going to win this game. And there was obviously a ton of external factors that I think played into the hands of Georgia Tech. But in football, whether it be high school football, college football, or NFL, there is something, particularly for programs that are kind of on the upswing, there is such thing as having an okay season to even maybe a down season by the looks of things. But depending on how you finish the end of that season, there is a real sense or a real thing of moving into off-season momentum. And I thought Brenke and Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets at the end of last season, even against that game against Georgia, I thought they were playing very good football considering for the, let's just call it, tools that they had in their own tool shed, right? They're not a very deep football team, but I thought Brenke had their offensive line playing tough, disciplined football. And I think he had his team believing in Haynes King. And I think Haynes King ultimately believed in the system that Brenke was putting together. So moving into this year with another year in his kind of program and his players kind of buying into the system, I really thought that, hey, this could be a pretty good football team. Maybe win 8 games, maybe win 9 games, right? I did not think they were going to be a 3-8 team or a 4-7 team. So when we circled this game, I think everyone had Florida State pretty hyped. Starting with Florida State, I think they hyped themselves up. I think you and I and most people who are close to Georgia football kind of understood what was going on with Florida State, and it was kind of maybe not a one-hit wonder, but I just think that they were oversaturated their talent to last year, and not a lot was going to be kind of peel over into this season. And I bring all this up because I think it's very important as a Georgia fan that Georgia Tech should not be slept on, right? When you look at the historical context of the ACC, right? There's a few teams in the Southeast that put a priority on football and have the geographic advantage of really ripe high school recruiting talent. You got Clemson, obviously, Clemson's resume speaks for itself. Florida State, Miami, and I think Georgia Tech falls in that bucket. What I'm saying is, I just think that he's building something at Georgia Tech that could be formidable, right? Because what people fail to realize, I think, when you're just kind of at home, is when you play an ACC schedule, it is so much easier to have longevity in your roster, right? Your players don't get banged up as much. You have more kind of freebie games where young players can get, quality reps early on and build that depth up. SEC is a different beast, right? Like, particularly in this new alignment. So I thought that was a huge win for Georgia Tech. I think it gives them an opportunity to build on something. And I don't think it's if I'm a Georgia fan, I just don't sweep that under the rug because I do think that if they gain some momentum, there's plenty of talent in the state of Georgia that Georgia football may have looked past a little bit, and those guys would go to Tennessee, Auburn, or somewhere else and end up having great college and then pro careers. And I think if those guys stop going to the Auburns, Tennessees of the world and start going to Tech, you could have yourself, a dogfight year in, year out with
Yeah.
Georgia Tech.
Yeah. And in an institution like that, where right, and we've talked about it before with the academic side playing a huge thing in recruiting in all
Mhm.
reality, right? It has been for a long, long time. You need that coach that can point to some production on the field to go up to those tech higher ups and be like, "Hey, this is what I've already done with this much. Just imagine how much we could bring as far as more enrollment, more hype around the athletic program as a whole, right? More ticket sales, and we know how those
Mhm.
ticket sales have been looking for Georgia Tech the last 5, 6 years, right? We can bring all that. Just give me a little bit more, and where it'd be, working with the collectives or just recruiting money in general to work with. And like I said, he's already got a former Georgia commit in there in the fold today, I think it was, and then they have a 5-star they got in last week before that matchup, which is one of their highest rated recruits of all time. So I think you kind of have that production already. Hey, Brent Key can go to his higher ups and be like, hey, just give me a little bit more backing here and there, a little more support, and we can really make it competitive, at least for clean old fashioned hate. November 29th, baby. It's going to be a fun one. And they're probably going to be 2-0 next week going to Georgia State. But
Don't
that's
get
all
me
we're going
wrong. We're going to smoke them at the end of the season. I just think that it's, I give Brett Key a lot of credit. It's not an easy job with the administration that they have over there. But when you are a legitimate when you're at a place like Georgia Tech and you have the ability to sell and use Atlanta as a selling point, it's not for nothing. That's all I'm saying. It's not for
yeah,
nothing.
yeah. All right, little Georgia Tech talk to the side. We'll move on. Week 1, Georgia versus Clemson in Atlanta. Quick question for you here, Artie. Let's get the brain working.
Mhm.
Who are the 2 active college coaches to win at least 2 national championships?
They're facing each other this weekend.
Dabo Swinney and Kirby Smart. You'd be
Mhm.
correct. Now, there's only one more coach in college football right now that's active that has even won one. You know that?
Active that has one
At
right
least one.
now.
Just one to their name. Yeah.
Last one to their name. Active, not Harbaugh because he's in the NFL. Not Day. Um, not let. Who we got?
Mac Brown,
UNC Chapel Hill. Good
North
call.
Carolina. Yep. Won it with
Oh,
Texas.
very good, very good. I almost said Brian Kelly, and then I was like, no, he just looks like Les Miles. But
Yeah.
anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. But series history, dude, I didn't know this though. 1897 is the first time these two met.
I believe it.
I don't know who was president there. You probably would know. You're a history major.
Oh God, 1897 before Teddy Roosevelt. I don't know. It'd be something. Not Andrew Johnson. He was Reconstruction. I don't know. Don't know. I'll have to
Me
look
either.
that up.
Don't have that one. If you know, drop in the comments.
I will.
But Georgia leads 43-18 all time, 7-1 in the last 8. Here's the interesting part, and I did the math on this. Georgia's margin of victory in season openers under Kirby. All right. There's been 8 straight wins. 35-8 comes out to average
Yeah,
margin of victory.
that checks out.
Closest game though, 2021 Clemson, 10-3. was at that game, saw that game-winning drive. That was I mean, think about defensive battles, some of the biggest defensive battles, and I know it was a season opener, so it really gets swept under the rug, of course, because Georgia won the national championship that year and such. But as far as like a defensive battle between two perennial powers, really talented teams as far as blue chip goes, really good coaching staffs, that was probably one of the last ones that stands out in my mind, especially for Georgia, right? I mean, that game, the offense was so hard to come by, really too talented in the trenches on both sides. That was a cool game, but that is the closest game as far as a season opener goes for Georgia and Kirby Smart.
That game also kind of set the tempo for that season for Georgia, right? Because we
Dominant
had
defense.
we had a kind of a funky quarterback situation. That was JD Daniels, right?
JT, yeah,
Was still playing, and I mean, to his credit, I don't think he lost the game as a starting quarterback at Georgia, but and it was just funky. We relied heavily on our defense for the first half of that season, and obviously Stetson became Stetson, but that I was in Dallas, Texas, at my friend Nick Center, a fellow dog's house, watching the game, and I was like, I've never seen a defense like this before in my life. And anyway, nostalgia. Let's
every
keep going.
single one of them has been drafted. But
Yeah.
yes, let's keep going. So that's a little series opener, right? But I think the biggest really highlight of this show that I really want to focus on here already is little Georgia news update reaction. Because unfortunately, I feel like, we talked about injuries last week, and it was one of our really key segments. But unfortunately, it has to be again because we found out that Roderick Robinson not only was dealing with a turf toe, but had surgery to repair it. Kirby Smart confirmed today. Now, said week to week, right? But it's a season opener, and he was just in a boot 2 weeks ago, right? Came out that he's been missing practice with it now. Now we found out it's been surgery, so he's heavily doubtful to play on Saturday. And that creates a couple issues here. And I think one that stands out in people's minds, and I've read reactions from Georgia fans today after I wrote the story. I think they're highlighting that Trevor Etienne and his offseason arrest could result in a game one suspension, right? And Kirby Smart's been asked. I think he was asked like 3 different times in today's presser, right? And of course, he's like, everything's in house. That'll happen when it happens. Just we're not going to tell you. So we're not going to know until that morning, right? And that's just if I'm a Georgia fan alone, just thinking, watch my dogs play this week. I want to win a national championship, whatever. That's a little disheartening, and your heart rate's going to be up. It's going to be up all week, right? And Saturday because it's something to lose. A running back like Roderick, who third in rushing last season for Georgia, right? Had to come on when we had some injuries to Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards. Those guys are gone, right? So he's going to have an expanded role. Great. Yeah, bringing Trevor Etienne from Florida. Really good all-around back. Played really well in the spring. He looks different when he has the ball in his hands. Stood out to me in that spring game when I was there watching him on the field. He just looks like a different guy. Once those special athletes get the balls in their hands and they're north and south, right? And it looks like they can see every defender on the field. You can just tell.
Yeah.
So it's all gravy. But now it comes to the point where there's a realistic situation where both of those are missing Saturday. So then you rely on a walk-on junior and Cass Jones, who Kirby Smart loves, and he told us last week, I think it was, that we need to put more respect on his name. I agree. Good all-around back. Hasn't been a workhorse though at any time during his career. Really been fighting for snaps, right? And then you have a freshman in Nate Frazier, right, who's done some really good things in fall camp, but he's a freshman. Right? He didn't join the team until this summer. All right. And then Branson Robinson coming off that serious knee injury in last year's fall camp. And we know Georgia and Kirby Smart, they're not going to rush people back, right? They don't do that. So how much are they going to put on his shoulders? It could be one of those situations where he was already feeling good and they thought he was playing well. So it's like, hey, I think, you're good to take an expanded role on Saturday with these guys are missing. So that's kind of the big situation here. I think my question out of that for you, Artie, is let's assume that we're going to be missing Etienne and Roderick. Let's take the worst case scenario first and talk about that. Offensive coordinator cap on, and it just makes sense that the offensive coordinator very well. You know how he thinks. You played with him, played under him. How would you protect kind of some inexperienced players in the backfield and maybe a lack of depth there? How would you kind of protect that and schematically maybe move things around?
Well, look, this is probably an answer that not a lot of people are going to expect, but I think based on the experience that I've had with Coach Bobo, like if guys are getting reps, meaningful reps in practice, and they're keeping the sets the same. When I mean what I mean by sets, I mean their standard offensive. Like we're gonna keep our two tight end sets. We're gonna keep our three wides, one tight end set. We're still gonna play with a fullback. Like if they're not dramatically changing the playbook, which my guess is that they are not, Coach Bobo, he has trust in Jones. He has trust in the guys in the room. And don't be surprised if they try to establish the run early. And it may not look as sexy or as explosive and dominant as when you had a Todd Gurley back there, or a Travis Etienne, or a Sony Michelle. But I'm going to take you guys back into the archives here of when your boy was playing, and when we had two very explosive backs in Keith Marshall and Todd Gurley. And if you look into 2013 season, which it seemed like everyone tore an ACL that year, but there was about mid-season and even the two seasons before that when Isaiah kind of got into some trouble, and we had to go through our second, third, and fourth back in the depth chart. And Bobo didn't switch a thing, right? We ran power, we ran lead. He put the game in the hands of the quarterback, and what I mean by that is he put a ton of responsibility on Aaron to check us in and check us out of different plays, whether it be we go up to the line of scrimmage with two runs and a pass, and he gave the quarterback the responsibility to make the at the line call. And so what I think is going to happen, he's going to put his trust in the guys in the room, but ultimately he's going to rely heavily on Carson Beck to be like, hey, I'm going to call the plays, but I trust you to read what the defense is giving you and then give them something back that puts us in a position to execute at a high level. And I don't think it matters. I mean, would it be great to have ETN? Yeah, but they probably would scheme things up to get ETN the looks that they want ETN to have.
Mm.
I don't think we should be surprised if we see first play of the game, we're in I formation and we go like Polo 47 or which is just power or lead, right? Power strong side, lead backside, and then maybe we go play action pass and we hit something down the seam on second and medium, right?
Mm.
I don't think Bobo is going to try to out scheme Clemson. I think he's like, hey, I got the Hogs up front.
Yeah.
I have one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and this is
Mm.
Georgia. Even some of our walk-ons would be starting at other places. I trust these guys because they know what to do. They play hard and they're dependable. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to change much, but I just don't think it's going to be as sexy as people would like it to be when they have Travis Etienne under there. Well, not Travis, but Etienne under there.
Trevor.
Travis is
Yeah.
his brother, I think. Trevor.
Yeah. Travis's brother. That's a hard one though. Dude,
Yeah.
I have to proofread stories when I do that because I always kind of want to put that name.
Yeah.
I'm glad we brought this up and I asked you that because that's a really good point. And it makes me think of as a game as a whole, schematically entering this matchup, your first drive because it's going to be
100%.
scripted. Did he do 2 drives or was it 1?
It's like typically it's the first 10 plays, right?
10
So
plays. Okay.
if you go, there would be times where we'd go, like, for instance, when we played Clemson in 2013, we went 3 and out and we scripted the first 3. And then Bobo was like, screw it, we're sticking to the script. I like what we like. And then if you remember the first play of the second drive, Todd Gurley, we went horn to the right side, which is basically I block down in the end. The guard pulls out, pushes out the linebacker, and Gurley was like home run, right? And
Mhm.
that was at Clemson 2013. We ended up
Yeah.
losing by 3. Shootout. Sammy Watkins, Taj Boyd, and Murray, Gurley. I mean, we had a squad,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we stuck to the script, and then basically once you're at after play 10, so really your first 2 drives is when you start reading what the defense gives you, and then
Yeah.
because people make adjustments after about 10 plays.
Yeah. And just projecting what would happen, and it makes sense. Like, I mean, even if you didn't have I think the depth concern, let's just call it a concern because we don't know for sure Etienne's going to be out, right? That's just we took the
Yeah, I
worst
think he's
case
gonna play
scenario
personally,
for
but
everybody just joining us on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you are, or the Pulse Sports Network on YouTube. We're talking about the worst case scenario: Georgia's backfield losing Trevor Etienne and Roger Robinson for the season opener versus Clemson. I think if you're Bobo, right? I mean, you don't want to enter the game and let's think it from Clemson's strengths standpoint, which is that front seven, right? Good back end too, but their front seven excels, right? And you got guys like Peter Woods, right? TJ Parker up there, and you have Barrett Carter back there and inside linebacker. Really good players, guys. These are going to be NFL draft picks, right? You're going to let them really just kind of pin their ears back and rush after Carson,
no.
fresh legs, like hyped up from the game, the season opener, playing number one team in the country. You don't let them do that. No, you're going to try to smash them in the mouth, right? At
Oh,
least just
totally.
set the tone a little bit. Even if you go 3 and out, or even if you have a mistake here and there, blocking scheme wise, you still want to. Yeah, I agree with that. As far as not changing anything from that standpoint, I think maybe further in the game is when we'll find out if there's a few things they can't do. Let's talk even FSU, right? You watch that for a quarter, and then you realize that Florida State didn't trust DJ, right? They trusted him from a game managing standpoint. Like, yeah, he's going to check down to this running back, right? But they didn't trust him to be like, all right, we're going to run four wide. We're going to hit that post up the seam. All right, you're going to have that matchup there, right? They don't let him do that. And the one he didn't go deep until like the third quarter, and it was a bad pass. He was open.
Yeah, but again, I think it's so important to just like think about these are all chess games, right? Like these offensive coordinators are chess players, right? Like when I say when I say we script like when we're scripting like a scripted plays, it's like the night before, Coach Bobo will be like, or Murray, right? We'll just be like, hey, we got trips left, and we're running this play. If they're in cover three and a guy, and a guy is hanging over that slot, right? Or on the 3x1 hanging over the Y, it's like, what are we checking to? Are you running a hot route? Are we checking out of it? Are we going to go to run? And the quarterback is typically assuming that he's been gifted the responsibility in which he has earned from the offensive coordinator. He is able to dictate what play they want to run, right? And so when you're talking about DJ, it became obvious that they had their hands tied, right? Because like they didn't necessarily trust him to get his guys in the right position to succeed. And so after those scripted plays, like anyone can look really good if you execute in those scripted, but if all of a sudden all the film that you watched for the previous season or 6 games, depending if it's game 7 of the team that you are playing, if all of a sudden they start throwing wrinkles in or they've switched up their defense entirely, you have to adjust on the fly, or you're just banging your head against the wall expecting a different result, right? And so I think the thing that makes Bobo a very good offense coordinator, and the great coach is great, whether it be Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, or any of the great coordinators that we've seen, is their ability to make adjustments on the fly, but not necessarily throw the throw the kitchen sink out, right? Where they still want to play their brand of football, but tailor it a little bit in real time in order to get the angles and the edges that they want to execute their plays.
Yeah. And I think I'll end it with just making sure we note that we're not looking past this is the returning offensive line as
Mhm.
one of the top in the country. And then, like you already kind of mentioned it there a little bit, is Beck and getting guys in the right spots and stuff like that. I
100%.
think you can put 100% of your money on that. It's like if I'm putting it on this, I'm insuring myself because of these two things, which are a huge factor, despite a little, lack of depth there at running back with the things we've already mentioned. We'll see what happens. I mean, we could wake up Saturday morning or right before the game and find out number one is strapped up and ready to go. So, and that will be,
Hey,
yeah,
it's easy to let a pit bull loose and say, "Hey, man, you know, go eat," right? And when you're a running back, sometimes you're just like, "Hey, we're not going left or right. We're going north and south. Run behind your running backs," and
mhm,
knowing that Carson's going to get everyone in the position. I mean, it'd be different if you had a true freshman quarterback playing on the road who
yeah,
who'd be shitting bricks, right?
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think I think I'm less concerned about the running back position because of how much talent comes through there.
Mm,
Like, man, I've seen walk-ons that are freaking Clydesdales, man. So
yeah,
I think we'll be all right.
yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. Let's do a little opponent breakdown. We'll get into the weeds here a little
Yep.
bit. Just some research I did today. And for you just joining us, we're talking Clemson, Georgia. Clemson's weaknesses here. We'll start with that. I do have something or a couple of things that Clemson does well I want to get to as well. Already let me know if you have any points on these things we haven't really
Mhm.
talked about. Stretch the field and red zone are the weaknesses here. Um, Finished with the number 52 offense in the country last year, 29.8 points per game. It was Klubnik's real first season as the starter, former five-star prospect, has the tools, right? They had really struggled pushing the ball down the field. They had some receiver injury issues, right? But they didn't have that guy to really create separation, right? Or besides that, even two guys who really could work off each other and cause problems for secondaries. 83rd in points per play. That kind of gives you an idea. It was a struggle to move the ball at times. And that's not to say that overall as a team they were not good. Because I think you can point to times last season that you were like, man, this is one of the top 10 teams in the country. Just speaking on position by position talent, right? Cohesiveness, especially on defense. Their defense kept them in a lot of games. That running game came on very strong at the latter part of the year, right? And that's what really propelled them. They were 4-4 midpoint way of the season, lost to Florida State in overtime. How big would have if they win that game? We're talking a completely different matchup here, really,
Mhm.
right? I mean, who knows what could happen there? They really started to rely on Phil Maffa, right? Really tough runner. That kid's a little bowling ball. All right. Really started to rely on him. They went 5 straight, right? The quality of opponent wasn't as good as that first stretch, but they still did the thing, right? And then you can't really how do you get better after a 4-4 start than 5 in a row? You win every game you play after that. I mean, that's
Yep.
not if I'm a Clemson fan, I'm okay with that. But I think once they really started relying on the offensive line and Phil Maffa and kind of take some stuff off of Cade's plate, they played a lot better. I mean, he averaged 5.4 yards per carry, third in the ACC in touchdowns with 13, right? And then the teams knew this was coming, right? So that points out like, hey, even though they stacked the box right against this team, that offensive line, the cohesiveness there, and Matt Luke, former Georgia offensive line coach, is over there doing some good things and coached them well. And then Phil Maffa, again, I really love Phil Maffa. I'm gonna mention his name a lot over the next two shows. He's a tough kid, right? And you talk about all right, so that's last year. What we got here this year, something they do well is 3 offensive line and returning with actually more than 25 starts apiece. Okay, that's an incredible number thinking about the transfer portal and how short careers now are at certain places in college football. All right, and then you have Moffa returning as the bell cow. All right, so that's something they do well. Okay, so that's what they're banking off of, and you add some K Klubnik, hopefully growth if I'm a Clemson fan into this season. All right, you can actually cause some problems. Another thing they do not so well is the red zone, like I mentioned earlier. This is probably my favorite stat I've found. Mind boggling to me. Clemson finished 121st in red zone scoring rate last year. That's crazy. Think about the talent they had, right? You get to the red zone, they had some kicking issues. Obviously, when as an offensive guy, that shorter position in the field, right? Much easier to defend, especially in the passing game, right, Artie? So they couldn't make it work that. And I think it just speaks to kind of Kate Klubnik in that first year under offensive coordinator Garrett Riley. They had a lot of issues. So that's what they're trying to work on. That's where Georgia was really good last year and was defending the red zone. They always have been in Kirby Smart era. So something that you look for. And Cade, they just
S-
need more out of Cade. And I'll finish it with this already and give you
Yeah.
a second here. 6.3 yards per attempt as well. I kind of looked over that one. I need to go back to it. That's a big one. 6.3 yards per attempt. That's kind of what we were seeing out of DJ, right? Until they kind of put it in his hands, like we need to go win the game, so you're going to pass, right, in the fourth quarter. Just crazy to me that 6.3 yards per attempt in that red zone. I mean, that's incredible.
So earlier in the show, we were talking about Georgia Tech, and we were talking about how there's this thing of like end of the season momentum, right? Like, obviously there's in season momentum, there's in game momentum, but don't get it twisted. You can finish a season a certain way, and that gives your entire program momentum going into the off season, right? And I think we touched on it a little bit, or you just touched on it about how Clemson finished the season last year, and I think the problem with Cade Klubnik was you could always tell he was very athletic. He was a bit erratic, right? He seemed like he was like not as bad as Bo Nix used to be at Auburn, but that kind of like I'm super athletic and I'm kind of running for my life and I know what I'm doing, but I don't really know what I'm like if I'm confident in it. And I saw a lot of that in the first half of last year. And then if you saw him kind of get comfortable in the second half of last season, things started calming down for him a little bit. And one thing that he has never lacked, which unfortunately I think DJ lost it, maybe he never had it, but I think unfortunately is for DJ is he didn't really have that moxie. He didn't really have that kind of like swag, if you will. And I do think Cade has that. I think Cade's teammates play hard for him. So I'm interested to see is if that momentum carries on into this season, particularly this game. And I want to see like the things that I'll be looking for very closely come, the first offensive drive for Clemson or the second offensive drive for Clemson is like, how calm does Cade look? Right. And I think that's going to be very important for the Clemson Tigers and their season is I think a lot's going to ride on him and his ability to orchestrate that offense and orchestrate at a high level, right? When
Yeah.
last year with Georgia football, everyone was like, well, what about Carson? I'm not really sure. He's got the talent, but does he have like what it takes? And each week, Carson just kept his mouth shut, kept playing, earned the trust, and he was always like this, right? Now he didn't play as early as Cade did, so sometimes playing early in your career gives you a lot of confidence because you learn a lot and you get that experience. But sometimes it also can leave you shell shocked a little bit, right? So I'll be very interested to see if he continues to grow the way he grew in the second half of last season, and if he could put everything together come this weekend. But I still think it's kind of be too much to overcome. I do like their offensive line. I like their skill players, but I just think that Georgia, particularly in that arena, right, the Falcons stadium, and in Atlanta, and just kind of that chip that Georgia has on their shoulder from last year, I think will probably be too much for Clemson to overcome. But I won't be surprised if we start seeing Clemson this year back to the kind of their old form of going, 12-1 or 11-2.
Yeah. And don't give a prediction. We're saving those for
Oh,
Thursday. Predictions Thursday. I'm giving you a forewarning. I thought you were about to spit out some
no, no,
numbers.
no,
We're
we
gonna
should, but I'm just
yeah.
saying,
All right.
I'm excited to see Cade because I kind of like I like his moxie, right?
Yeah.
But if I was a Clemson fan, he would also give me a heart attack if that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
He's tough. Well, untimely interceptions and fumbles really
Yeah,
cost them in late in games, especially Florida State.
but
And you
but
can't
he's
do
so
that. I think
athletic, so it's like,
yes, yeah.
so it's just like he's fun, but he's also a heart attack waiting to happen for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And he could be a different guy this year. I think for me, and I'll leave it this is and I was gonna say this for Thursday, but I think it just makes too much sense to do now, is an
Mhm.
added wrinkle or some way that I think they got better, right? Well, we don't know until they play some snaps. But I think I would really put most of my, confidence behind this is they have added some wrinkle as far as stretching the field and the guys they brought in through the 24 class. Now, these
Yeah,
are, mind you, true freshmen, but I think they're gonna play really early. One of them might be starting a receiver. And I think they're going to be really relied upon because Cade, he can only do so much if he doesn't have the guys to get separation. All right. Or they're
that's
going
a
to
good
have one
point.
of the best running games in the country so they can play action off of that. Right. And
Yeah,
really force some separation. But I think bringing in TJ Moore, 5-star, number 4 at his position, a receiver, and Bryant Wesco, who made a really good catch in the spring game. Now that I think about it, in the back corner of the end zone. Really athletic guys. He was number 11 at his position, Bryant Wesco was. So they bring these 2 guys, and I think one of the things they sold was like, "Hey, we need receivers.
mhm.
So you're gonna play early and often if you come." Right? And, Clemson, and they didn't take any players out of the transfer portal, not a single one.
It's so
And
insane.
yeah, it is. But, I mean, you can back it up on the field, baby. That's the cool thing. If I'm a Clemson fan, I'm like, well, we either gonna eventually fire Sweeney because we just keep tanking because of our transfer portal strategy, or we consistently play well, compete for the ACC championship, and college football playoff with what we're doing. And I think one of those things they can maybe bank on at the end of the season is, oh, we added two really, really good receivers and we were able to stretch the field more. So that's one wrinkle I think we could see Clemson look a little differently than they did last year, which is very, very plausible with being an entirely new season.
And the
Um,
and the best way for skill players to overcome youth is having an experienced quarterback, which again, things come back to Cade, right?
yeah.
If he comes in there cool, calm, collective, and is slicing up a good Georgia defense, man, it'll be tough. But predictions next week we can talk, or next on Thursday we can talk about it then.
Yeah, yeah, we'll give our game predictions too, and we'll pick a few games here, 5 actually, um, that we're gonna be following along with, pick some lines there, me versus Artie in the spread. Last thing I wanna end up here with on Clemson, and we'll do more of this on Thursday. Defense, right? And we talked a little bit about it. I think I went into some detail the last few weeks about their defense. So they finished 8th in the country last year. A lot of that production is returning. I know they lost Jeremiah Trotter Jr. They lost a cornerback in Wiggins, right? Two really good players, but they have a lot of good guys still back in here. They're returning. They played a lot of football. Also, some really talented freshmen as well as sophomores, right? So they had Barrett Carter at linebacker. I already mentioned him. I mentioned that trio up front of TJ Parker, Peter Woods. Khalil Barnes is a freshman All American too. He was at safety. Um, balance group up front. Really good players in the secondary. Avion Terrell, right? That's you know who that is. AJ's little brother, right? He's gonna be playing in his big brother stadium on Saturday, which is cool. And RJ Mickens at strong safety. Right, these guys play a lot of football. They know their system. They're talented. Really interested to see how Georgia goes after them. Right, I think and speaking from the balance that Mike Bobo loves in his offense and the players he can do it with at Georgia. Right, you can be as balanced as you want at Georgia. I think and with the things we just mentioned and the quarterback playing the offensive line, receiver talent, as well as tight end and running back group, I think he can be really, really balanced, which is going to be interesting to see just the chess pieces you were talking about, how he moves them around, right? How he sets this Clemson defense up because they're going to be hyped up, man. Their ears are going to be pinned back, especially on third down with these really good pass rushers. Um, Barrett Carter he's not just a rundown guy. He's not just a fill the inside gap, right? He's a sideline to sideline player that plays really well in coverage too. I think he had a pick six last year. Um, so just some things to watch. It's what this we'll classify it as what Clemson does well. So if you get into a defensive battle with this team, they stick around, right?
Oh, totally. But
Yeah.
again, like there, when we were talking about Mike Bobo and also talking about Kirby as well, it's like they like to pick a fight. Like they're not like, hey, let's play defense. You know what I mean? They're just like, let's go for the jugular. You know what I mean? Let's go let's go out and let's go see if these guys want to like go toe to toe. And they're not afraid to get punched in the mouth because they're not afraid to punch somebody in the mouth either. Right. And that
Mhm.
to me, that's the attitude great teams should have. So I expect Bobo to, in my opinion, this is how I think it's going to happen. I
Okay.
think he's going to come out there, smash mouth football early on, and try to soften up that defense as early as he possibly can, and let Carson Beck do his thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's from like standpoint? I'm just thinking is really kind of tiring out and pushing the defensive line off their spots a little bit early, right? Because I keep thinking about, like, pinning my ears back, full energy going into a season opener against, Heisman hopeful quarterback, number 1 team. All you hear it all off season how good this offensive line is, right? And you wanna prove your stuff, but then they mix direction, get you off your spot, eye candy, like my Bobo's so good at, right, in that Georgia offense, right? And they kinda get you off and when it comes time to that 3rd down pass, you're gassed, or you're looking at motions and you're like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, I think it really comes down to like Clemson. Their confidence is built in the fact that they have a great defense, and Bobo understands that. Kirby understands that, and I think the best way that you can take someone's will, right, and make them question their kind of identity is by challenge them in a setting to see if they are as good as they say and they think that they are.
Mhm,
And I think what makes Bobo unique in my experience is you may not like him, you may think he runs too many screens on third and whatever you're called, but he's not afraid. And he would always be like, hey, let's go toe to toe with these guys. If they got an all-American linebacker, let's take our walk-on fullback and have him smash him in the mouth all game long until and these were Coach Bobo's words. He goes, make them quit. He used some other colorful language in between those words, but he'd say, make them quit. And I always thought that was very unique. That's kind of something I always loved about it, because I was like, man, we can go throw the ball 40 times a game and win, but sometimes there's no better satisfaction that you can get as a football player than lining up man on man and just be like, let's just go beat the shit out of each other, and who's ever standing at the end of the game wins. And I think when you're up against a defense like Clemson, that's what you got to do, right? Fortunately for us, we have a quarterback in Carson Beck, and I know Brian Green here has a question about Beck being
Yeah.
able to maintain his quick release during Clemson personnel, and I'll answer that here in a second. But yeah, I think Bobo is going to be ready to play smash mouth football. And Cash Jones might go for $150 on like 60 carries, but I like it.
If that don't get you fired up, your wood's wet, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I love that, man. We should post that right underneath the graphic here, UJ Football Live. Just make them quit.
Make
Yeah,
them
let's
quit,
get
man. I say
let's
it
get
all the
it.
time as an adult. So
Yeah? Yeah, I
oh yeah.
bet. I might now too. Yeah, let's get to Brian Green's question. We appreciate you sending that through the Twitter comments, Brian. Will Beck be able to maintain his quick release numbers with our wide receiver group and Clemson's personnel? First thought is the cohesiveness in the wide receiver group with Carson. Like, I know we were lost by Rod Thomas. We added some transfers, but Dominic Lovett, Dylan Bell, those two guys alone, really, and even pairing with Oscar Delp, and as many snaps and passes, game time as well, not just including practice, spring training, fall camp. All that they have put together, I think the timing situation with those guys is going to be almost at the highest level you can get. I mean, they've been around so long in today's college football. How often do you find a quarterback like that? He's been in Athens as long as Carson Beck has, with a receiver group like even Dominic. He was a transfer last season, but they had one of the best connections out of the entire team. And you add another offseason to it, and Dylan Bell can just do it all. Very, very smart football player. And he showed that last year too, timing wise, being where he needs to be. And Carson Beck not only knows where they need to be, he helps them get into that position, right? And Artie, you just talked about kind of how Aaron did it and what you saw from Beck last year doing that. Just my take on it.
Yeah, I think when you think about like quick releases, obviously it's a skill set, right? Like some people have long releases, some have quick. But a lot of it, again, it comes back to what I was talking about earlier, JC, which you just touched on. Is like, are you making the right reads, and are you putting yourself in a position to make the right reads, right? Like if we've got a run play or called, right, but all of a sudden they're jacked up at the box, like, and we're in a 2-2 set. It's like we might or the quarterback might have the liberty to change it to some, two slants in the outside and flats, right? And because you can see the blitz coming on, and your quick release is, yeah, part of it is a skill set, like how quickly can you get rid of the ball, but it's more mental than anything, right? It's like how quickly can you pick up on what the defense is giving you, and can you make the right, read at the right time? And I know
Yeah.
we're going to get Aaron on here in the next couple of weeks, and he'll be able to describe it, but you could have the quickest releases in the world, but if you don't know what the defense is giving you, you're going to look like an idiot, right? Like
Mhm.
I think that's kind of what happened with Zach Wilson in the NFL. He has when he's playing 7-on-7 or he's running a pro day, you're like that's a golden arm, right? Look at that release, look at those no look passes, but then you get him in a game and he can't really read the things correctly.
Seeing ghosts.
Yeah, and again, like I'm not knocking Zach Wilson. I couldn't play quarterback. Hell no. Like it's a different level of football IQ that you have to have and have to maintain when the pressure is on. I
Mm.
think Carson can, because he already has, and I think he will continue to do so. And I think he will absolutely continue to do so on Saturday against Clemson, because even if we are playing smash mouth football, he is going to at some point have to make plays, and he's going to have to make plays against a top 5 defense nationally, and I think he will.
Yeah. And just to finish it up with Brian's question here, I think, and what he was getting at the last part was Clemson's personnel. I think definitely, and to Artie's kind of piggybacking a little bit there on the opposite
Mhm.
side is if you do make mistakes, Clemson definitely has the players to make you pay.
Oh, no doubt. No
Absolutely,
doubt.
right? But I think, like you said, I mean, because we have a proven track record from Carson in this offense of making the right decisions most of the time. You know, we're a
Right.
top 5 offense last year, right? So we can use that to just kind of, giving some backing to our points here.
Also, Georgia fans, before we move on, I love you, but if he does throw an interception, don't bench him, okay? Don't
It'll
don't,
be all
don't
right.
fire him. Right, he'll be okay. But I'm not saying he will, but I know how you guys get, and things get a little bit temperamental when the game's on. So it'll be all right. Things happen.
Hey, it's a instinct. It really is.
Oh, I know it. I've seen you. I've seen you live, Jason. I know.
Oh, man. Yeah, don't save that for Thursday. All right, let's end it, guys. We'll end it with a little odds peek at Georgia-Clemson right here. So this is from FanDuel. Georgia -13.5, right? Just under 2 touchdowns. You never know what this is gonna move. Could be 14.5, could be 12.5 by Saturday. Total 48.5. Mind you, the average score of Georgia's season openers is 35-8. No, is that right, Artie? Did I tell you that right number? 35
I
to 8.
think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
35-8. But the last time we played Clemson, if I remember correctly, it was like
10
12.
to 3. 10
10
to
to
3.
3.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So we talked about both defenses here.
We have a
Yeah.
different
I mean,
quarterback though this year than we did that year. So I know we're doing predictions Thursday, but I'm just kind of putting these numbers in my mind real quick.
yeah, yeah. Well, and then an added fact for you. First is Clemson's first game as a double-digit betting underdog in 12 years. 12 years.
That's a long time, dude.
That
That's
is.
when
That is
I was still playing college ball. To put things in perspective, gentlemen.
hundreds of games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a little peek at that. And if you are thinking about putting lettuce on this game, 13, I was telling a friend, he was asking me the other day, and I was like, I saw it at 14.5 when I first looked. Maybe it was just depending on what sports book you look at. And I was like, 14, just over 2 touchdowns. I'm like, that screams don't mess with it. Right. But if you get it 13.5, you win by 2 touchdowns. It's nice, even 14. Okay. I don't know. All right. I'm just mentioning it here. We'll talk through it on Thursday. We'll definitely have our picks. It's something I'm going to be thinking about for the next 3 days already. We're going to have to put some work in the Excel spreadsheets. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get the nerds out. I'll go find some here on campus, some data nerds. But man, spit these out for me, all right, Coach?
Dude, that's what we need. We got to use your connections, man.
I'll tell you one thing. I'm not spitting out any data. That's for damn sure.
We need like Matt Damon on Will Good Hunting. That's what we need, dude. Just to
Will Good
do.
Hunting, dude. Goodwill Hunting.
Oh, Goodwill Hunting. What? Same thing.
No, not at all. Goodwill
It's
Hunting is arguably the greatest film of all
it's
time.
it's a
It's
Monday.
my personal favorite. Yeah, it's a Monday. You better get your mind right.
I'm
Don't be
trying.
disrespecting a Boston classic.
I've been staring at a
Okay,
computer for like 11 hours. All
this
right,
may
give me
be a Georgia football podcast, but I am a Boston man at heart through and through. All
go
right.
Braves. Go Braves.
Uh,
Anyways, yeah, we'll sign off here. All right, I think it's a good point. Guys, we'll be back on Thursday, give our predictions. We're going to talk more about Georgia and Clemson, and some added notes there and get you set for game day, man. It's here. College football is here, folks. Can't wait. We are so excited. And thanks for joining us live on Facebook, Twitter, or on YouTube on the Pulse Sports Network. We'll be back. Until then, Artie, take care.
Go Dogs.